Hello and welcome to episode 2 of The Future Mind, this mini series where I'll talk about psychological traits, attitudes, mindsets, and habits that allow us to respond to a much faster changing world. All of this is really at the heart of the work that we do with organizations in helping leaders become far more future ready. So, in episode 2, I'm going to discuss a trait called psychological flexibility. Have you ever wondered, for instance, if you're feeling angry, is it healthier to express that anger or is it healthier to suppress it? Or what about another emotion? Let's say pride. Should you express your pride or should you suppress your pride? Now, all of us are actually making choices like this several times a day. We're not always conscious about it. Psychological flexibility is being in control of these choices. So, what is psychological flexibility? At its heart, it comes from a particular form of behavioral therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy. I won't go into the details, except what you need to know is that it is proven as a very effective tool in helping people manage adverse circumstances, difficult situations, difficult emotions, and bounce back. So, one way to think of it is it's the bounce back skill. And How does that work? It allows us to take control in situations where we're not always aware we actually have power in how to respond. And let me give an example. Let's say there's a colleague at work who, for the last several weeks, maybe several months, has been a little rude, or maybe she snubs me in every meeting. And over the last few weeks or months, I've been feeling a little annoyed. Uh, but I haven't really verbalized that in my mind. I just know that somehow I feel a little irritated when I'm around her. Psychological flexibility starts with being able to connect with the emotion that I'm experiencing. So, for instance, if I were to become conscious that, oh, whenever she's around, I feel a little hurt. I feel a little not recognized or not valued. I feel a little hurt and I feel a little annoyed. That's naming the emotions. So I become aware that this is actually what I'm experiencing. Then it's about my thinking about, okay, given that that's the case, um, maybe I think she's, let's say, jealous of me. That's a thought, right? Or maybe I think she thinks she's that much better than me. That's another thought. And there could be many such thoughts that could be, going on in my mind. Yet the freedom lies in knowing that these are, at the end of the day, just thoughts. We do not have to necessarily believe any of them. They're just ideas. They come, they go. They don't necessarily have to have the power that they sometimes do. So, if you have high levels of psychological flexibility, what this gives you is the ability to choose a response. And you can choose that response based on what is it that matters to you? What's important to you? What do you want to do with this work colleague? For instance, if this is someone whom you're going to meet, say once in a while, let's say, once every few weeks, or perhaps this is someone whom you are no longer going to be working with very closely in the future, you could choose to just ignore it, and that's fine. On the other hand, if this is a colleague with whom you necessarily have to work very, very closely because you're working on something that's hugely important to you, a big project, a big goal that both of you need to work, shoulder to shoulder on, then perhaps a better choice might be that, okay, let's find a way to bring this up and let's find a way to diffuse the situation in some way. This flexibility of choices is really where our freedom and our ability to bounce through difficult circumstances come from. So, how can you build psychological flexibility? Step one in building psychological flexibility actually comes from being conscious of what we're experiencing. Now, on my phone, I actually have an app that asks me twice a day, once in the afternoon around lunchtime and once in the evening, what is it that I'm feeling? And I've had these pop-ups for the last several months, and I can tell you that it still takes me a couple of seconds to think about, okay, so what am I feeling in this moment? Because most of the time we're so lost in what we're doing that we tend to lose that connection. What is it that I'm actually feeling? And emotions are very powerful drivers of our actions. So step one is just being conscious and being aware of what is it that you're feeling in a given moment. And you can do this any which way you want. There are several apps around that. But you could also just, make it a habit of pausing every few hours and asking yourself, okay, so what am I feeling in this moment? The second is being aware of what your long term goals really are, or what is important to you, what really, really matters. Because your response will be in service of what really matters. And that's equally true personally or professionally. So, you know, obviously, I'm assuming that, if you're living with people you care about, then their well being sometimes matters more to you than maybe what you're feeling. And yet, that for a long term relationship, both of them need to come together. So that's the second one, really being conscious of what your long term goals are, what matters to you, what is important enough for you to, you know, to think through and then respond carefully. And finally, there's a technique called cognitive diffusion, which is quite helpful. At its core, cognitive diffusion is simply this, that I have a thought that comes to my mind, and let's say that thought is, like in the example of my work colleague, she's jealous of me. I can choose to believe that idea, or I can choose to say, okay, that was an idea. It doesn't have to be true. It could equally be untrue. And I don't have to necessarily act on that, because that thought that she's jealous of me creates a certain response from within, an emotional response from within, and in a sense, nudges me to act it out in ways that may not be in mine and her best interest over time. So that's what cognitive diffusion is about. It's about becoming conscious of what the thought is that's going on in our mind, the thought that's associated with that emotion, and yet sort of like holding it lightly, not needing to believe every single thought, being able to hold that thought lightly and say, okay, that's a thought. So, all these put together, being conscious of what I'm feeling in any given moment, being aware of what really matters to me, what my long term goals are, and the ability to separate a thought from what I must believe or not, all comprise this skill called psychological flexibility. Psychological flexibility develops our future mind by giving us resilience, particularly in the face of circumstances that are not easy, difficult emotions, challenging situations. It allows us the ability to respond in ways that are helpful for us and the situation, and bounce back when we're faced with adversity. So I hope you liked that. If you found it helpful, do feel free to share it with your friends, and would love to see you in the next episode. Bye for now.